So before we get started, a quick administrative note. Our moderator is running 5 minutes late due to an emergency. So we're going to start, and we'll have Sam as the interim moderator in the interest of time. And then as Mike comes in, he can take over his role. So we'll get started. Over to you, Sam.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So yeah, you may have noticed there are only 3 of us on the panel, so hopefully our moderator will join us shortly. But we're very happy to improvise, and I think it's in line with the theme of this panel around agile innovation. So there we go. We've improvised. So the title of this panel is Right-Sized Rigor, Balancing IT Resilience with Agile Innovation. And I'm joined today by Richard, Anaf, and I'm Sam Attias, representing a company called Celonis. So maybe we want to start with a brief introduction. Richard, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is Rick Lindberg. I am a longtime CIO. I'm not going to put a number to that. It'll age me. Work with lots of different organizations, large global consulting firms, insurance organizations, and more recently, a not-for-profit publisher, standards development organization. Had to do lots of digital, quote-unquote, transformations in those organizations, and as you can all imagine, balancing IT resiliency with, the desire to do innovation is just one of the key things in all of those transformations and in all of those different organizations. So when this topic came up, it's like, oh yeah, done a lot of that and really happy to talk about it.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Anaf Durrani. I lead, I'm VP of Product and Platform Engineering for Grainger. I also have, speaking of interim, I have interim responsibilities for leading for information security as well. Balancing IT resilience with agile innovation, I think it's been, if you're in the delivery side of the organization, that's been part of your career. That's just basically a daily transaction of trying to figure out how to balance things and how to convince our business stakeholders, whether they be on the product management side or even on the business side, that how do we drive resiliency? How do we drive some of the IT challenges and embed them or resolve them by embedding them into the way we build, test, and deliver software? So looking forward to this conversation with you.
Fantastic, thank you. And from myself, so my name is Sam Attias. I work for a technology vendor called Celonis. So hopefully I can add a bit of a different perspective to the conversation. So we are a technology vendor that sell a SaaS platform. So we're around 10 years old, founded out of Germany, the kind of heartland of process and also beer. So we're very proud of that we are serving many customers in transforming their processes. And we've been guilty over the past few years of avoiding IT in our discussions. So our traditional sales motion has heavily relied on going to line of business stakeholders, going to the CFO, going to a VP of finance directly, and aligning to their priorities, and often coming to IT second. And now, as the company has clearly grown, and we're taking a much more strategic role in the stacks of our customers, the CIO becomes an ever more important stakeholder for us. So this is also part of why we are here today, to try and understand the priorities of CIOs and where we fit into your IT stack and how we ultimately align with these priorities. So with that said, the topic today is, of course, about establishing this balance between IT resilience and agile innovation. So let's start there. What does IT resilience mean to you as an IT leader? So Richard, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think it's ultimately defined by how much can I build for the investment that's allotted. Because at the end of the day, you have to balance against that, right? So, obviously, in terms of resilience, you have to understand what are the potential possible disruptions, and then you have to be able to build systems and to be able to withstand that, or to be able to recover from that. But at the end of the day, I think there were some comments made earlier, is that not everybody understands. I mean, if we're all IT people, then that's sort of one thing, but people don't understand, or business leaders may not understand, what is IT resilience and why do we need it? I mean, we haven't had a problem, so why should we worry about it? It's kind of like insurance, you don't need it until you need it. But I think ultimately, you've got to keep your eye on that. You've got to, constantly be looking for, what's possible, and then balance that against sort of practical realities like investment and budgets and things like that.
So it's about balancing the kind of realities and also managing the expectations of people who often take it for granted.
That's right, yeah, and sort of educating them, right? So yeah, these things could happen. I find it useful to use stories. I remember being at the board and wanting to get some investment in our cybersecurity process. And fortunately for us, unfortunately for them, a very similar organization in another country had gone public with, they had a ransomware attack. And they were very public about what happened, and they talked about things like one person clicked on one link, and that started the whole thing. And there was 3 months that went by before they could even start to get sort of their act together. And I was able to use that in that meeting to say, oh, this organization, right? Well, this is what happened. Here's the YouTube link. Go look at it if you don't believe me. And just kind of put a scare them in a sense that this is close to home. This is an organization similar to ours. So that was lucky in a sense for us, because I was able to use that to, convince them that we needed to make some investments.
Fantastic. But ultimately, I hope it shouldn't have to come to that and scaring your leadership team into making these decisions. But often we see it's very much the case. And Anaf, do you have a similar experience?
Yeah. So when I really like your opening where, you're giving us, you're given an investment, how you can take advantage of that investment, right? Full advantage of it. And, when you go through any kind of transformation or an evolution within your infrastructure, the expectation from the business is that we're going to have agility. We're going to have cost savings. We're going to have reduction in cycle time, more productivity. But what they don't typically talk about is improving quality, improving resilience, improving security along the way. And that's something that we as IT leaders need to inherently build that into the system as we build it, right? As we start from the beginning. And and it's also our responsibility I would say it's our burden to make sure that we educate our business partners and helping them understand what it means to X, Y, and Z, right? So when you think about security, for example, in this interim hat that I have on right now, I have a different level of appreciation for the security team. Why? Because they have to deal with a lot of that burden. And what I'm asking them to do is share that burden across the organization and help other people understand what it means to have not a robust, security posture in a certain area. And so for me, it's really about how do we build that culture in, and it starts with our teams, right? And building that expectation into however we're building our software, and partnering up with whether it's our product management partners or our different business stakeholders to help them understand what it means. And to your point, Richard, if there is an issue that's going to happen in production, we've seen many issues happen in production, point to those as data points, right? And then build that back into how we prevent it and how we can mitigate it if it does happen. And that's, again, going back to my earlier point, that's just part of our, everyday life, right? In terms of making those type of decisions.
Interesting. So it's also about becoming part of the culture and ingraining that into the way people think and the way people make decisions.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's much easier said than done, though, by the way.
And it takes time.
It does take time. As we're creatures of habits. We're creatures of habit, right? We're human beings. We tend to forget. We need to be continuously conditioned, and when we're under stress, we default back to our normal settings, which is not something that sometimes aligns with what the company wants you to do. So yes, it definitely takes time, but with the right level of accountability, you can start to recondition your workforce to start thinking about things in a different way.
Absolutely, and I guess from our side of the coin, the way we have kind of seen resilience, And I guess the way traditionally IT leaders and CIOs we talk to see resilience, it's very much around the adaptability of their infrastructure, their IT systems to changes or threats such as cybersecurity, such as hardware failures. But what we've seen over the past few years is leaders also approach us and say, hey, how can we make our landscape and our business adaptable to macroeconomic factors such as supply chain disruptions? We saw a huge amount of demand during the COVID pandemic due to the supply chain disruptions around China. When the Ukraine war kicked off, we had a huge amount of customers calling us and say, hey, we thought about making our systems resilient to cyber, to resilient to hardware failures, to bugs, but not about these external changes. So I think it's a different lens, and due to all these companies becoming larger, more global, multinational, we need to think also about how we make our systems resilient to these external factors. And I think that is more often now falling on the laps of the CIOs that we are at least working with and talking to.
Yeah.
So we spoke a bit about the resilience side. Now on the agile innovation side, maybe we want to share a few ideas of like, what does agile innovation really mean for you, and what do you see your role as CIOs in owning that and also supporting that where it's owned potentially in another part of the business? So maybe Anaf, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. One of the things that I talked to the team about is we're not a delivery organization. We're more than that. We're an organization that experiments as we deliver, and experimentation can come in many different ways. And the way we think about it, again, it's just like we talked about with IT resilience, is essentially to build it into our culture. From terms like slicing the cake or having an MVP, right? And so there's various ways that you can start to embed that expectation that we're going to continue to iterate towards something that makes sense, right, to the business, that aligns to the business needs, and we'll learn along the way. That is going to give us an opportunity to not only think about the product that we intend to build, but potentially even derivatives of that product that we need to build. The other thing that we're working on, starting to look at now from how you tie Agile to innovation is, and we talked about a lot of this within the last day and a half, is about, our team is moving away from, we're not moving away, but we're building software products today, and we're gravitating towards data products. And right behind that is going to be, how do we then leverage AI in our teams? And AI is going to be about, well, not only how do we augment our products that we're building, but it's also going to be how do we augment our team members? And so that can only be done if you have that level of agility embedded within your, like a foundation that you're building in terms of how you start thinking about creating software, adding, even resilience into the way you think, right? If you can't have that foundation, then innovation just becomes you can do Agile, but you can't really do innovation, right? It's just a matter of just iterating.
Yeah, great.
Fantastic. And now we welcome our moderator
Yes.
to the stage.
My apologies, unavoidable emergency. Thank you, gentlemen. It looks like you're off to an amazing start, so you've already gotten to meet these incredible panelists. And of course, what you see is a tremendous amount of diversity. What makes this panel unique is that we have our requisite CIO. We have someone who's really mostly focused on product engineering, and somewhat unusual for the symposium, we have someone who represents the vendor side and who can speak to issues working with CIOs from the perspective of a vendor. So since I'm coming in partway, why don't we start off with a question around the challenges that you face in balancing innovation and the resilience of infrastructure, right? And let's look at Exhibit A, how not to do it. Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines built up mountains and mountains of technical debt over decades. And it was all great until it wasn't. And they took massive reputational and financial damage, okay? On the other side, we look at a company like Airbnb, right? Remarkably agile company that even in the face of COVID, when every hotel was being decimated, somehow they figured out how to innovate and how to respond. So we've got sort of these continuum, and we've got these two poles of examples. Rick, we'll start with you, right? You've been CIO of 3 organizations. You walked into ASTML. You inherited a team that wasn't necessarily thinking about Agile. I know in our preparation, Anaf, we talked about people, tools, all that stuff. So let's talk about how you manage that massive change effort to move from pure resilience to some balance.
Yeah, so that was an interesting experience. The particular challenge that I faced when I got to ASTM, well, there was many of them, right? There's lots of different challenges, but I got there, and you do what you do in your sort of first 90, 100 days, and I started to look around, and I found out that a software platform we had, a subscription platform we had, was in really bad shape, and it was about to fall over. This was not something I was charged with. This was not something on the job description, but a lot of conversation around here today has been, we aren't really technology people. We're business leaders that specialize in technology. So, of course, that concerned me. And the organization, was like lots of organizations in a sense. Oh yeah, Agile, we do Agile, but they really didn't do Agile. And what ended up had to happen is that we had this emergency, right? We had to fix this platform. It was basically burning, if you will. It was a burning platform. And we had to very quickly basically re-engineer the platform. And I had a team of people, a lot of really smart, good people, but not, let's say, involved in professional IT organizations through their history and sort of their experience of being there. And there was a lot of different components that were missing. So one of the big challenges around, balancing resiliency with innovation and agile innovation was the fact that we had to very quickly take on this massive, huge project. And so the basic decision we came down to is that I was going to roll out Agile, and because we had to do it on scale and we had a very limited time frame, I rolled out SAFe, which is Scaled Agile Framework. Now, I wouldn't have chosen to do it that way if I didn't have to, because that's crazy. That's just absolutely crazy. So we kind of went from 0 to 100 in very short order because we had to do it, right? And a big part of making all that happen was sort of recognizing the team. What are the skills that we had? I had a team with a lot of domain knowledge, and that was valuable, especially in terms of building this platform. But I was missing things. I was missing vendor management. I was missing project management and process stuff. I was missing architecture. And what I was able to do in this process is bring in the pieces that I was missing, sort of marry them up with the domain expertise, and the plan and the idea, and it worked out this way, thank God, was that the domain people were able to impart that domain knowledge to the newer people in the organization. The newer people in the organization, the architect, the vendor management, the process program management person, were able to then learn the domain knowledge and also impart that other piece in. And that helped us really work hard or work well together as a team. And then we also, this is another important piece, we can't do it all ourselves, and we needed to bring outside experts. So one of the things we did there was institute a multi-vendor strategy to bring in partners from outside in all kinds of different areas to help us ramp up and scale and get all these things done in a really quick fashion. That we had to do. And then we were able to use that, sort of getting through this quickly, but because we had this sort of emergency type of a thing, I was able to use that as a means of building the IT resilience, the systems because that wasn't really there, right? And it wasn't so much, oh, we need to have resilient systems, therefore give me money to build it. It was, as we were doing it, we might as well build in resilience. So we had philosophies, future-proof technology. We used, microservices and all these different types of things to make sure that as we were rebuilding this thing to sort of save the business, if you will, we were able to build in these resilient things. And then learn as we went in terms of, okay, how can we be agile and how can we be innovative? We had to innovate in the sense of being able to recreate what we had. So the ideas and the concepts were innovative, just the way in which we did it were innovative.
That's great. Thank you, Rick.
And then that led on.
So Anaf, you've had an incredibly varied history. Motorola, Orbitz, Cigna, Ticketmaster, and now Grainger, right? And so one of the questions that you asked me to ask you, is it even possible to balance innovation and resilience? And I bet you've got a lot of patterns that you've seen. Where would you say was the biggest challenge in your career in balancing innovation and resilience? And where would you say you've seen the biggest success?
I would say our biggest challenge was when I realized that I had an honorary degree in psychology. And basically, it's the most difficult challenge was dealing with people.
Okay.
And it was a healthcare company.
Yeah.
And roughly 10,000 engineers. We just acquired another organization about the same size.
Yeah.
And so when you think about how people think, you got to find what their motivations are.
Yeah.
And then try to align those motivations back to the direction that you want to take them.
Okay.
That was probably the most difficult, I would say, challenge in my career.
Right.
We got to the point where everyone agreed on a foundation that we needed to build, and then from there, how do we then start to stack it up, add some bolt-on in terms of decisions that we were wanting to make, and get to a point where, directionally at least, we were heading in the right direction, in the same direction.
Yeah.
And what I used to tell the team was, there's more of us that, more of the people that we were trying to change than the people that are actually doing the change.
Oh, absolutely.
So we need to
Yeah.
align, right?
Yes.
And so there's a good amount of heartburn even within the people that wanted to drive the change.
Right.
Now, where I've seen the most success is I would say currently at Grainger.
Yeah.
We have over the last 2 years hired over 200 people, reshaped our vendor and our so I would say our contractor and our
Yeah.
FTE landscape.
Yeah.
To your point about vendor management, making sure that everyone's aligned. Essentially almost press the reset button here.
Yeah.
But just like with any transformation, you got to be very careful in doing that. We, from an Agile point of view, we moved to lean Agile, so just-in-time Agile.
Yeah.
In a way where we would have just-in-time demos, meetings, focus the engineers' time on what is the most valuable thing that they can work on, which is
Yeah.
building software. And so we took that approach and then looked at product managers, engineering leaders. What do we want them to focus on, right? Because everyone's focused on everything, and that's probably not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to where we are today, over close to 45, 50 product teams that are able to continuously deliver software,
Yeah.
embedding security in the way we think, the way we behave, and the way we run, to always thinking about resiliency from when we think about architecting our product to the way we validate the changes in production. So
Yeah.
we've come a long way, and that's where I've seen the most success.
That's great. Let me build on one point you just raised, which is the most important thing that the people do is build software. So we have all of these auto code generation tools that have appeared like GitHub Copilot. What has been your experience and your philosophy about bringing that capability into the team?
We are piloting GitHub
Yeah.
Copilot,
Yeah.
and we're actually, ironically, we have a meeting next week to talk about what do we want to focus on. Do we want to focus on productivity?
Yeah.
Do we want to focus on cost savings? What do we want to focus
That's
on?
great. So you're-
And again, we're looking at this more from a perspective of how do we augment our engineers?
Right.
They have the context.
Yeah.
We're still learning, right?
Sure.
Even AI is learning. So we want to go on this journey to figure out what is the right thing for our team members, and then go from there and expand out.
That's great.
So.
Okay, how big of a pilot will it be, roughly?
Right now, the pilot is about 200 engineers.
Okay, it's quite sizable. That's great. So Sam, you bring a unique perspective, right? So you represent a company that you created a brand new category called process mining. And somewhat unusually, it came out of Munich, Germany, not out of Silicon Valley. And so you spend a lot of time helping CIOs improve their resilience, improve their innovation. Talk about how you've been able to do that. Maybe give us a very concrete example where you were able to go in and bring that level of sort of unique value to a stack within a client.
Absolutely. So I think, like I mentioned when I introduced myself, we traditionally sold very much to the line of business.
Yeah.
As we were growing as a vendor, as we were selling a very verticalized solution. And now, as we've expanded our portfolio to become a broader platform, the CIO becomes a much more important stakeholder to us.
Yeah.
And as part of that, we've also been having a lot of conversations, having a lot of interviews with CIOs to try and understand, hey, what are their priorities, what are they thinking about, and where we fit. So in that exercise, we've learned a lot. It's been very interesting speaking to many of yourselves and your counterparts. But we broadly see CIOs as balancing these two priorities. On one side, it's about keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
It's around maintaining what they have today, making sure they manage the cost, the risk, the scope of their existing infrastructure and their existing stack. And on the other side of the coin, it's around delivering transformation to the business. It's the pressure that comes bottom up from line of business leaders around delivering transformation quickly, testing out new technologies. It's the pressure that comes from the CEO saying, we need to differentiate and stay relevant. And it's also CIOs and CDOs who are taking a role themselves in being the drivers of this innovation.
Right.
So ultimately, we see CIOs balancing these two difficult and often opposing priorities.
Yeah.
And the strategy that many of them are taking, and now we're assisting them to take, is effectively how can they optimize their existing stack and their infrastructure and take those savings to reinvest them in innovation and transformation projects.
That's great. Thank you.
And this is ultimately where Celonis fits,
Yeah.
is that we see this evolution of the stack whereby organizations can effectively keep a resilient core of transactional systems, whether they be SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, minimize customizations, keep that core as lean and clean as possible, and then effectively creating a layer of kind of intelligent abstraction on top, whereby you can develop your more agile innovations atop that, whilst managing the risk and the cost of the underlying stack. So I think this bimodal stack that we see evolving into a lot of our companies allows them to both be resilient, but also at the same time deliver transformation and innovations to the business at the speed they need to stay competitive.
Great, thank you. So how many of you were here for the debate yesterday? All right, a lot of you. So one of the things we talked about was accountability, specifically the accountability of the CIO for managing AI. So I want to go back to a question we had talked about, which is accountability. So as you think about this, what some people might call the enterprise deep state, this embedded just status quo bias and the incredible challenges of driving innovation in the face of that, who is accountable ultimately for successful innovation when you are facing this Herculean, almost Promethean task to drive innovation through a very, very large hierarchical organization? Who ultimately owns that?
Well, that's a good question. You always want to start with yourself.
Yeah.
And the direction that you pay for the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
That's where the accountability is. Your organization is looking for clarity. They want to understand what the destination is.
Yeah.
And how they're going to be part of that destination. That is, I think that's my responsibility,
Yeah.
to make sure that I can articulate that in a clear and concise way. But then follow through, right, is part of that accountability as well.
Yeah.
Where if you're sharing this with your team and you're saying you're going to be part of this journey, you're going to learn, thrive, grow, make a difference as part of this journey, then it's my responsibility to make it happen. I'd bring
Yeah.
that to the table.
Okay.
What I expect from the team
Yeah.
is to follow through on their commitments as well.
Yeah.
I use this analogy of crossing the bridge. And I want everyone to cross that bridge. Some people are going to run across.
Yeah.
Some people you need to drag them across.
Yeah.
Some people will probably not cross the bridge or jump off the bridge.
Right.
But it's my responsibility to help them understand
Right.
what path they need to take.
That's great.
And avoid you talked about complacency. There's
Yeah.
like this Fisher curve of change.
Yep.
They talk about, at the end of each, the start and the end is complacency. And that's something that I get a little paranoid about, because once you get to that point and you start to feel complacent,
Yeah.
that's when you know things need to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do you prevent getting to that state in the first place?
Right.
And that's again, accountability is on me.
Yeah.
To not have the organization go down that path.
Yeah, and this is where Jensen Huang is so incredibly articulate, right? That this is a guy that's got a $3 trillion market cap company. He says we could go out of business tomorrow, right? So instilling that level of relentlessness in your team every day. Don't take it for granted. Don't care if we're a $15 billion global company. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Someone could eat our lunch tomorrow. Rick, how about you? You, as you said, you had to really completely change culture. So where does accountability lie as you're going through that?
Well, I think in general, accountability lies with everybody. I think similar to what Anaf was saying was people need to do their part, right? And as leaders, we need to help them understand what we're doing and how to get there. And to your point, we're going to cross that bridge, and here's how you need to get there. It's helpful if senior management, the CEO, the president, whatever the top sort of executive position is behind that and can be a cheerleader or support it, and maybe ultimately be accountable. That would definitely be helpful. But I think in terms of technology and these days, it's involved in everything. It's up to us, the technology leaders of an organization, to sort of recognize it, help to educate people about innovation, and we need to be accountable for it. And I think the point you just made is that it doesn't matter how big you are, how long you've been in business, things change fast. And we've got to be cognizant of that, and we've got to be sort of very vigilant, and that then sort of makes it everybody's accountable for.
Thank you. So I'm sensitive to the time, and if there are questions, I'm going to ask people to raise their hands and get a microphone. But let me finish on this note, right? I'm going to put you all on the spot, right? So a lot of wisdom amongst the three of you. If we think about this overarching theme of the Goldilocks paradox, right? Navigating extremes, and then bringing it down to this specific panel, is there any one principle or mantra that works for you that you might share with our audience today, right? What is it that is sort of job one, the one thing they need to keep in mind as they think about striking the ideal balance between these two extremes? I'm going to start with you, since you gave me that, like, oh shit, look.
I think the insight I can share is that we work with around 1,300 companies who implement our technology, and some of them implement our technology and they're very successful. And there is another segment of the market or of our customer base that run with our technology, and they're not as successful. Yeah. And we're a technology vendor, and it's in our interest to try and understand the difference and help our customers ultimately get value from it. And I think a key part of it comes down to the change management and the culture of the organization.
Which you can't control very much, can you, as a vendor? You can't control the culture very much.
We can't control, but we can work with partners, and we can help our customers whether they be our sponsors on the business side or on the IT side, to understand best practices of what's worked with other vendors in their industry, in their domain, in their vertical, and say, hey, this is what's worked for companies of a similar nature to yours, connecting the dots, working with system integrators, the Deloitte, the Accentures of the world, who can come along and impart their wisdom and support the journey. And I think acknowledging that it's also a cultural shift that needs to happen alongside the implementation of any technology, which can take a long time.
Right.
And the people and implementing leaders should be very cognizant.
All right. So it's in your world very much it's a human issue. It comes down to the human issue. Okay. Anaf?
Yeah. At the beginning of your question, I was thinking about, well, keep it simple.
Yeah.
But then as you finished the question, the thought that was running through my mind was one of my engineering leaders once said, let's stop calling the work that we need to do, or whether it's called let's stop calling technical debt.
Right.
Let's stop calling the work that we need to do to up the resilience. Like don't call it an IT challenge. Let's rebrand this.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to people, right? And what people think. Yeah, it's technical debt. Keep it on the side. We'll keep moving forward, right? And you accumulate this, but no one really talks about it. So instead, what we've been doing is reinforcing or reconditioning our mindset that the work that we're doing is not something that IT needs to worry about.
Right.
But the work that we're doing is something that we all need to worry about as a team. But at the same time, it's our responsibility as IT professionals to maybe, to be able to articulate why.
Right.
Just like we ask our product partners to articulate the why.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the one thing that I would say.
That's great. And again, it's a very human thing, right? If you don't know the why, you don't have a sense of purpose, and it gets back to apathy and complacency and all of those things. Right. So, and I've seen this with engineers constantly, right? If they know the why, it's like it's a on-off switch.
Yep.
Right? They bring a completely different level of engagement and intensity to their role. Love it. Yep. Thank you. Rick?
So I think what you asked was what's the sort of mantra that I would use, and there's probably many of them, but the one that kind of comes to mind, it gets back to the human side of things, is IT is a team sport, right? We do this together. We can't do it without being together, and that involves the staff and the other people in the organization and our partners all kind of coming together, understanding the why, what's the goal, how do we go, why are we doing this, and then, celebrating at the end. Well, what did we do good, and what can we do better?
Right. That's great. I mean, I teach courses on leadership, and it's exactly the core of the messages. Someone asked me last night, right, do you think all people are lazy? And I said, absolutely not. If you give people a clear sense of purpose and you create an environment for them to thrive, they will blow your mind every time, okay? And so what I'm hearing from you guys is that's exactly the way that you think about, creating this environment that allows for people to be at their very best, right? There's always going to be technology challenges. There's always going to be hierarchical, organizational, political challenges. But you can rise above that stuff if people are committed. Thank you. Anybody have questions for this great panel? Yeah, please. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman? He's way in the back. Thank you.
The question I would like to ask relates to the software repurposing the software. I have an economics background. I believe in sunk costs. I believe in technical debt. I would like to know how often is the issue of basically just declaring technical debt and writing it off something you can get away with in your organization, or does finance or somebody push back and say, just one more year, then we can write it off. And so you're left in the worst of both worlds, which is maintaining something that creates an opportunity cost for you and gets in the way of developing the agility that this entire panel has been about.
Yeah. Technical debt is always going to bite you in the ass one day or another. Right?
It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, it's always there. It's going to nag at you, right? So you got to deal with it. In other words, there's going to be maintenance, right? And then as everything around it evolves, then it becomes a security issue, right? Or it becomes other kinds of compliance concerns, right? So it's always going to gnaw at you. And so I haven't seen a scenario where that we just, say it's over here and just leave it.
So you're just saying you have to suck it up?
You have to suck it up, or you deal with it. I mean, when I say suck it up, it's like you got to do something with it.
Yeah, can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You can't just ignore it. It's an elephant in the room.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, questions, more questions. Yes, this gentleman in the back over here. And we're going to wait for the microphone, okay? It's a big room. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Richard, actually. You mentioned talking about your organization going through a scaled Agile transformation. And you made it sound like you went from 0 to 100, where I hear a lot of folks talk about crawl, walk, run. So I wanted to hear about your experience and the pros and cons of going from 0 to 100.
Well, yeah, crawl, walk, run would be the smarter way to do it. I didn't really have a choice because we had to rebuild this platform. It's a proverbial changing the wheels on the bus as it's going down the road. And part of what we did in really short order was I brought in these new people that I had talked about earlier. I brought in a lot of partners, right? And that was the need for the vendor management, like somebody who was focused on making sure we had the right partners on the table and developing those relationships, right? So we're all in this together. They aren't just, I don't like the word vendor. They aren't vendors, they're partners, right? And that's the way we're working. And we had to move very quick, and we had to do these things, and we had to, correct the mistakes very quickly. And it was a really intense period of time. And another interesting sort of fact was that, so we did SAFE, I don't know if you're familiar with SAFE, but they have program increments, and you plan, and then you design and deliver in a specified period of time. We ended up doing it on a quarterly basis. But right after our first PI planning session was when COVID hit. We finished that first PI planning, the first sort of planning, organized planning. Agile is sort of meant for interactions between people, not meant for remoteness, right? And we ended up having to do most of this through the pandemic. And I don't know, I think in some sense that was kind of a blessing because people were stuck at home and had nothing else to do. And people were working literally 68 hours a week, and that's what we needed. And they had nothing else to do because of the pandemic, so it kind of worked out that way. So, I mean, I could go on and talk about this for a long time, but that was a part of how we did it. We just really didn't have a choice, and we kept going. Fortunately, I had great
questions. Other questions in the room, please. This gentleman over here. Yeah, Sam. Just wait one second. He's going to bring the mic to you, okay? Because we're being recorded. It'll be able to be captured, okay?
Maybe this one's for Anaf, but so how do you? So you have a number of product teams. How do you get balanced delivery with what I call the infinite path to perfect? So I have my engineers, developers, architects that can work forever on technology and never deliver anything. So I'm just curious, how do you put a close to that?
Start off with your objectives and your key results, like your OKRs, right? Make them, just like SMART goals, right? Just like that, and make it outcomes oriented and time bounded. We have monthly ops reviews. We talk about how we're getting better as a team. So each team has its own ops review. And part of the ops review is also talking about the roadmap, whether we're making progress with the roadmap. Independently, our product partners, along with our engineering leader, have check-ins with our business stakeholders. And we talk about the roadmap and whether whatever we've delivered is actually making tangible progress. And so when you think about, the business will have their own goals, right, that are tied to revenue, for example. And we will have OKRs that are aligned to those goals. And, so there's a traceability that exists. And the way that we bring that together is through those monthly reviews. We also have quarterly reviews with our executive leadership team. So from our CEO, his directs, down from the business side and from the engineering side, we get together and we talk about, here's what we've delivered over the last 3 months, here's what we're working on today, and here's what we're going to be committing to for the next 3 months. And that's, again, it's a continuous process that exists across every single product domain that we have. we organize ourselves, organize ourselves in a way where it's like domain-driven design, and so we have these domain product teams, and within those teams, within those domains, there's multiple teams, and they all get together and they talk about whatever they're focused on to make sure that they're working on things that are making a difference. We have run into one scenario where, and this was relatively new, where a team was not able to make progress, and you can see it in the engagement scores, you can see it through the feedback, so there's different mechanisms that we use in order for us to assess whether a team is actually meeting their mission or not, and they're meeting their OKRs. And then if there's an intervention that's required, we intervene.
Great. Let me close on this question, because generative AI is such a hot topic right now. So obviously one of the challenges that organizations face is they don't have enough resources to address both ends, to address both resilience as well as innovation. I'm a believer, and I've seen enough studies to be convinced, and I've experienced it in my own personal life, that my personal productivity has increased by several orders of magnitude in the last year by using these tools. And so the question is, do you see the opportunity to free up a lot of time, not just with GitHub Copilot and the coding productivity, but just within the team itself, right? The personal productivity, the ability to create a lot of extra space, right? Because what you're hearing from people like even David Goldman, the head of Goldman Sachs right now, I want my next generation of coders to be philosophy majors. And we're hearing that from IBM as well, right? We want people with more critical thinking. So are we going to begin to see a different type of technologist in the organization that's going to be thinking more strategically, more architecturally, and creating more space to be innovative? Is that something that we can expect to see?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, no doubt.
Yeah, I think it starts from some of the monotonous, things that we need to focus on.
Yeah.
Right. So you're seeing a lot of tools that are coming out to do that.
Yeah.
And then it becomes when you think about like technical debt or IT, how do you build IT resilience?
Yeah.
There are tools that are starting to focus on that.
Yeah.
So it will, if there's a vulnerability, a security vulnerability, it'll help you understand what the fix would be, how to remediate it, right? So it's done faster, real time.
Yeah.
Eventually, it's going to get into more of the match between you need to understand the business context and how do you build that business context into the recommendations that are coming back from Gen AI. And so I see it kind of maturing into that space where thinking about the type of background that a person will need to have. It's interesting, non-tech background possibly, but I think that's going to take some years to get there.
Yeah, okay. Rick, what do you think?
Well, I think, absolutely. I think just as Anaf was saying is that especially the redundant sort of things, we were playing around with using AI to generate code. Some of the code that's just basic kind of stuff doesn't require, higher level thought, if you will. But as that becomes more prevalent, we get better at using it, the tools get better, then people are going to be more free to think more sort of strategically and maybe more critically. Yeah. And that, I think, will become a more prominent part of your development.
Okay.
So I would say about a good 20 years ago, when I was working for Motorola as an engineer, we had this programming, this platform. We would just create a state machine, and it would generate code.
Wow, 20 years ago.
This is 20 years ago, and we were considered the most productive team in Motorola at the time.
Wow.
But what it did, though, the side effect was, we eventually forgot how to program, how to code.
So it's kind of like Google Maps.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's right. You can't get any
so there's a iterative and learning process that we will go through here.
Yeah.
Like that's why I kind of hesitated a little bit when you asked whether it'll be like a philosophy major right coming in. Possibly. I think that's probably we're admitting to it that this is what's going to happen, acknowledging it, being pragmatic about it.
Fascinating.
And that's essentially where I wouldn't doubt if we go down that path.
Fascinating. How about your most forward-looking clients? Are you seeing early evidence of this today with them and their embrace in certain use cases?
So what we see amongst our more successful clients is what works well is a very close collaboration between IT and the business. And I think this prevalence of kind of fusion teams where you have IT leaders and stakeholders providing the technology lens and then the business counterparts providing their domain expertise. And I think what AI will enable is effectively even a further kind of generation of that, where the roles are effectively become morphed, and you have this notion of kind of a business technologist,
Right.
Where it's somebody who comes potentially with a lot of domain expertise, but then can use AI to accelerate a code without necessarily having that technical background. And we're starting to see that, and we're starting also to cater to that kind of audience when we're developing new features and new products within our own platform.
Okay. Well, we are getting the out of time signal. So I want to thank Sam, Anaf, and Rick for all coming here from London, from Chicago, from out west. Thank you all for sharing your wisdom and your insights with us today. We appreciate it. Thank you.